Good evening, everyone here on Random. We are here with our Final Fantasy Randomizer. Well, this is a special weekly, isn't it? We've got Caleb and Lord Fizzlebeef in here in the booth with me tonight, and we are doing a submission video for RPG Limit Break. So, this is going to be a little bit different than what you guys are used to, but I think you're going to enjoy the show. These are also a kind of soft launch for our spring tournament flags, so you get to enjoy that too. So, Fizzle, Caleb, do you want to kind of say something real quick? A hi is fine.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. This is a really fun set of flags. We've got some really top tier runners up on screen, so this should be quite the show for folks, whether or not they're familiar with the randomizer or just coming to the game for the first time.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Final Fantasy, here's the important things. Fighters hit hard, thieves run fast, black belts hit even harder, white mages heal, black mages blow things up, red mages are the best. There you go, you got everything you need to know.
More or
but
less.
Yeah, we'll go over everything as we go, but let's go ahead and get this gate lifted. Let's get these runners going. We have Silverfire, Saint Von Jester, Sonny Wrath, and Dangwu running on here tonight, and they are off to the town of Canary to look at their magic. And let's see, we've got heal and... Alright, yeah, so we've got heal, fast, and I think I saw an exit, or was that ruse at first level?
That was a ruse.
Yeah, so, right off the bat, magic is very important because basically until probably, the mid-game, it's going to be your primary source of damage, and it's also probably going to be the main thing keeping you alive.
So one of the main reasons why magic is so important early on, it's all hinging on how much starting gold the party has to work with, which is always 400 gold. And with that 400 gold, sometimes you can do what Silverfire did. You can buy a scimitar. Sometimes you can afford maybe a falchion or something slightly better than that, but you're not going to be able to afford a silver sword or something that's an actual good starting weapon. So you're going to have to rely on early black magic sweeper spells to get the job done until you get enough money for gear.
Which, unfortunately, we didn't really get any of those today. Which is probably part of the reason Syl got that scimitar, because basically we're relying on the fighter's damage output to take care of problems. Now, one thing that we would point out, a couple of our runners actually went ahead and went to talk to the king. And he had the canoe, which is a very interesting play. It looks like they may just be not bothering with Temple of Fiends at all. So, yeah. The early progression in this game, in vanilla, you're supposed to go to the Temple of Fiends, fight Garland, the king and the princess give you stuff, and then you go on your merry way. Silverfire is kind of following that, because the princess is an extra key item check. But Saint Von Jester and Dangwu are basically just kind of following their own path.
Dangwu's path is interesting. Dangwu seemed to want to prioritize Matoya's Cave, which is one of the very few spots you can get to right out of the gate that has some easy treasure chests. And there's no monsters in Matoya's Cave, so you're going to get whatever you want out of there. Sonny Wrath seems to be traveling by boat, and you'll get slightly harder encounters to get more money, but you can also head straight for the town of Pravoka and hope that there's better magic there so that we find those sweeper spells.
Yeah, and that is... Alright, so Sonny Wrath has opted to go ahead and fight the pirates without a sweeper spell, which you can get away with it because pirates are guaranteed to only hit you, and they generally have between 3 and 12 HP with the flags that we're using. Because we're basically, enemy stats can be adjusted by 1/2 to twice as much, with some fiddly bits in there, but that's close enough for you to know what's going on. And problem is, pirates can still beat you senseless if it turns out that they rolled kind of okay and you don't have any armor. That being said, level 2 does seem to have those sweeper spells we needed. I saw an Ice 2, a Lit 2, and a Zap available. But there's Life at level 2 White Magic. And Life is a pretty interesting spell. Caleb, why don't you chime in on that front?
Life is one of the most important spells you could say in the game. When the enemies overcome your party members and knock them down, life is the only way to pick them back up unless you're near a town. It will revive the enemy, or it'll revive your party member, which is a single HP, but it being at level 2 allows the red mage to learn it, and it will also allow the fighter upon promotion to be able to learn it. So that's really good for the people that are running fighters and red mages.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, the white mage is generally a safe character to bring because they're guaranteed to be able to learn every white magic spell eventually. While the fighter and the red mage can learn white magic, they do also have restrictions based on what slot that spell falls into, specifically like where in the magic shop list order it lands based on what spell was there originally, because we do shuffle the spells from the original game. And so life is normally available, I believe, at level 6 and not level 2.
Level 5, and I think you need to be promoted to get it, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it is a promotion-only spell like Exit. But yeah, so for those of you who are unaware of what we're talking about, promotion is basically a class change that happens later in the game where characters gain access to improved equipment and abilities most of the time. But it looks like most of our runners have cleared out Garland, have gotten the Princess, have gotten the Canoe from the King, and have gotten the Cube from BK, or are in the process of doing those things. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of routes they're looking for right now. So they got a ship out the gate. Normally you have to get around to Provoca and fight the pirates to get the ship. And you can have it shuffled into a random location in the randomizer, but there's an option to go ahead and get the ship for free out the gate. But critically, there's something else they're missing. Fizzle, what is that?
So in order to get out of the inner sea by boat, we need to convert a little land bridge on the western end from a land bridge into a canal so that we can sail out to the greater world itself. That's one of the potential ways that we can get out. The second potential way, and I want to kind of mention this real quick, so we found a canoe early on, and that allows us to paddle around on the waterways. Now, in the southeast corner of this starting continent area is the airship desert. Well, the Ryukon desert. It's the desert where you find the airship. So if we happen to find the floater, then the canal might not actually be that necessary. So our runners are now currently either looking for the canal and hoping that the floater is elsewhere, or hoping that they bump into the floater and hoping that their rivals don't know that that's what they're looking for right now.
Now, hold on. That's an interesting point. Why are we looking for such an important item that we might just bump into it?
So, in the Final Fantasy I randomizer, we have key items that essentially fall into two pools. We have incentivized locations where we know where it is. For example, fighting Garland rescues Princess Sarah. That's an incentive location. The King, that's an incentive location. Killing the pirates, that's an incentive location. So we know that there's going to be a key item there. And we know that there are 18 key locations because that's how we've set up this particular flag set. But we've incentivized 20 items. So 2 of those items are going to be, you can't have 20 items in 18 places, so 2 of those are going to be out in the world somewhere, we know not where. And further, we decided not to incentivize the canal on purpose, so that's a 3rd item that's going to be loose in the world somewhere we're looking for.
Right. So it's one of those things where we do know that the canal, thanks to some changes that have been made to the logic, has to be somewhere on this continent. But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to have it to leave the continent. It just means that if we don't find the floater, we can still leave. So, what that translates to is the party knows a few places they can go look. There's the Ice Cave Dungeon. That's accessible to them right now with that connection. There are several NPCs they haven't talked to yet. If one of the items that those NPCs want before they'll give you something is available, that's another option for where the floater might turn up. Or they might just have to find that canal. It's kind of a mixed bag, honestly. And there's one of those items, speaking of it, on SVJ's side. The TNT allows you to go talk to Narek, the dwarf, who in the vanilla game is actually the NPC who canal for you. But because we have shuffled all of the what we call fetch quest rewards, those NPCs that you give an item to, they give you something back. That in turn means that we're not necessarily going to be seeing the canal from Narek. In fact, we know we're not because the canal's not incentivized, but Narek is. But Narek could hand over the floater, or he could hand over, I don't know, I believe we have the bracelet incentivized, so he might have that. I mean, that'd be nice. The opal bracelet's really good armor. But it doesn't actually allow us to progress.
Not by itself. Because the opal bracelet is the best mage armor in the game, and it's equivalent to, say, fire or ice armor for the fighter, but you can just stick it on anyone, it would make some of the more dangerous dungeons that have incentive items that much more doable. So it's not direct progression, but it could potentially help enable progression.
That's true, because there are a couple of high-density, item dungeons that are not incentivized. Volcano and Marsh Cave. Marsh Cave's terrible, and it is full of all kinds of trouble. And it's one of those things where you don't want to go there. Although you might, because our runners did just pick up level 3 Fade.
Level 3 Fade is nice, but just to expound on something real quick, there is the saying in the Final Fantasy I randomizer community, never do Marsh. Just never do it. Pretend it doesn't exist. And everyone just kind of nods along in agreement, but why that's such a true statement is something that I think makes the Final Fantasy I randomizer unique, in that the big obstacle in this game is usually trash encounters, not the bosses. The bosses can be bad, don't get me wrong, but so many of the trash encounters are the things that you have to overcome. And Marsh Cave has a lot
utter garbage.
It has so many creatures in it that you don't find anywhere else, or just you don't want to find anywhere else. It's got... I'm trying to remember if it's 13 different enemy sprites that are in it. So that's 13 times that something could roll something that's super lethal that's just gonna stop your party in its tracks.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things where, yeah, basically the issue you run into in Marsh Cave and in Ice Cave, what Fizzle was saying, you just have this variety of enemies, and because of the way that we shuffle enemy abilities, with this flag set in particular, any enemy can have basically any ability outside of, the final bosses in the game, and what they have available. And so you have this issue where basically anything can kill you at any time in Final Fantasy Randomizer. It's kind of ridiculous in some ways. Because in Final Fantasy I, there's a lot of very lethal abilities. And Final Fantasy I, yeah, right there, the ghouls with Frost. Frost is a fairly strong ability, and Dazzle stuns, and that's awful. Yeah, it's just... Final Fantasy I does not pull punches with its abilities. You have moves that will incapacitate your party members, and only have a couple of ways to fix them. You have high damage skills and spells. You have instant kill skills and spells, and enemies can have all of those. Some enemies can have several of those in rapid succession. And so you can wind up in a situation like Syl, where you know that there are encounters in this dungeon that can just unleash on you, kill half your party, and then stun the rest so that their friends can finish you off.
And I think the best part about this Death Trap Fiesta is that in other Final Fantasy games, you just get a ribbon, and then you're fine forever. No, we have non-elemental death traps. The ribbon doesn't do anything to those.
Yeah, now, Dangwoo has gone ahead and made that volcano, and he's found a Zeus Gauntlet. So, that's something else about Final Fantasy 1. It has castable equipment like a lot of other RPGs do. The difference, though, is that castable equipment is, oh, my lord, okay. That was quick. We'll jump back to that in a moment, but just finishing the thought. Equipment in this game is carried by individual party members, so if you find a good casting item, you don't just get to have that sitting in your inventory, just pull it out and use it and put it back in your inventory. No. Someone's inventory slot is now committed to carrying that thing. And I think everyone did also find a Bane sword, which is nice. Bane is one of those instant kill spells, which is actually really useful. And hello, Loose Adamant. And Ribbon. And Loose Canal.
Well, alright then.
Okay, so a lot just happened there, and we need to unpack. So, link chests. Let's talk about that first. Final Fantasy has limited storage for chest tiles, basically. So some chests in the game share the same ID internal to the game. We call those linked chests. If you open one, all of the chests that share that ID are considered to be. So what Sonnyrath there did is open one of the chests that connects to a chest that Silverfire is about to open, if everything goes well, here on the north side of the Marsh Cave. As it so happened in this case, that had the canal in it. At the same time, Dangwoo was opening chests with the armory. None of those are linked chests. However, one of them had the adamant in it. That's one of those other turn-in items, which coincidentally happens to be the other turn-in the Dwarf Cave. So Dangwoo is probably about to hightail it over, because there's a high probability he's about to find something good. He also found a ribbon, which, Fizzle, you were talking about a minute ago, so why don't we unpack what the ribbon does?
So, in Final Fantasy I, most, let's call it 90% of skills and abilities that an enemy is going to throw at you fall into one of 8 schools of magic. There's the ones everyone knows. There's fire, there's ice, there's lightning, there's death, there's stone poison, that's one element, there's status, there's time, and there's earth. And the ribbon just blocks all of them. Well, when I say block, essentially when an ability goes to hit you, it rolls on an accuracy chart and measures against your character's magic defense. But what the ribbon does is it just guts the accuracy down to effectively 0. So things that would have a very high chance to hit you are now suddenly what we call 3 in 256, in that 3 out of every 256 times it will work regardless of resistance. But that's a very, very, very low chance. And for damage spells, it goes a step further in that it cuts the damage almost in half.
Yeah, and with status effects, it's especially useful. Because, generally speaking, status effects are all or nothing. And so if you have a very, very low chance of getting affected by a status effect, that's really helpful. For example, the astute viewer might notice that Silverfire right now is getting put to sleep by these werewolves repeatedly. That ribbon that Dangwoo is currently carting around, I believe blocks that. I don't think sleep is non-elemental. I think it's considered status.
Yeah, sleep is status element.
Yeah. So a character with a ribbon just isn't affected by sleep. And you know what that means? They're not knocked out by sleep. And that means they can run away, they can kill the werewolves, or any of that. But anyway, Dangwoo is currently talking to the dwarves. Oh, that's a chime. That is an interesting item to find. And we'll talk about what the chime does here in a moment. Because there's the Wow! Wow. So, I think all of the runners are going to be tilted. Because we got that TNT pretty much automatically, didn't we?
We got the TNT from the Circle of Sages in Crescent Lake.
Yeah. So, anyone could have gone ahead and turned in that TNT. And could have been airborne. We know that no one did that, that Dang Wu was the first runner to turn in that TNT. But, none of them know that. All of them at this moment, if I'm not crazy, Fizzle, have to assume someone took that TNT gamble. And they've been flying around while I've been just, running around on a boat and a canoe and, diving all of these dungeons and doing all this canal stuff. And, that is incredibly, tilting in a lot of ways.
Right. Dengwu is the first to make that horrific realization, but it'll happen to every single one of them as time goes on.
Meanwhile, Sonirath has located the key over in the Titan's Cave. And that's one of the little changes that people who are familiar with the game may have felt in the back of their head but didn't quite piece together that we've made. We've slightly moved the Titan and changed the shape of his cave so that you have to have the reward chests that are in there. We call that the Titan's Trove. In this flag set, Titan's Trove is incentivized. And in this case, it turned out to have the key. Caleb, what does the key do?
The key, despite the conventional wisdom that you should use several different sorts of keys for locked doors throughout the world, there's only one key that locks doors in Final Fantasy, and it's the Mystic Key, and it locks doors in the Canaria Castle, the Dwarven Armory in the Dwarf Cave, the Elfland Armory in Elfland Castle, 2 rooms in the Temple of Fiends, and a random door in the Sea Shrine, and a random door in the Temple of Fiends Revisited, as well as 3 doors in the bottom of Marsh Cave.
Yeah, and so the key basically can block... Well, I mean, you have to have it to get into the final dungeon, basically. And so that's a very big find. It also opens up a bunch of what we like to call free chests. Basically chests that you have to... that you don't have to fight anything to get to. You can just run into a place, pop open the door, and you get a bunch of items without having to... And Dangwu is checking a few of those right now. Now, this can be an incentive location where he's checking. It's not in these flags, but it can be. He doesn't get much out of it. The light axe is nice to find. And yeah. Go ahead.
Just to highlight what we were talking about earlier about limited inventory space, it frequently happens multiple times a run, where you're going and you're opening boxes, you find cool weapons, you find cool armor, only to be told, can't hold that right now. So you have to open your inventory because characters can hold 4 weapons and they only can have 1 equipped at a time. That's perfectly fine. Characters can only hold 4 pieces of armor, and sometimes they're all equipped, and sometimes you have to make choices of, do I want to hold a caster item and ditch this piece of armor that's actually effective? Or do I want to leave this caster item behind because I need this piece of armor? It's one of the more interesting mental puzzles that you have to do repeatedly as the game goes on.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we've seen too much in the chests right now. But it is one of those things. St. Von Jester did take advantage of that fade to go ahead and pick off those vampires and whiz vampires. And that's another case where someone's probably sitting there at home. Wait a minute, that's not in the game in the volcano. Nor this nightmare and this evil man. What's going on? And the answer is, oh, we changed all of the spike tiles. All the tiles that force you to fight a particular formation. But out of the corner of my eye, I think I saw something happen on Dangwoo's screen. Did any of y'all catch that?
You sure did. He went into the free chests in the Cardia Isles, and he hauled out a Massmune, which is... Not only is it the highest attack power weapon in the game, some of the highest... I think it is actually the highest accuracy in the game, but literally any class can equip it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it's basically the strongest sword. And yeah, we are now seeing all of the other runners discover, oh, I could have had an airship at any time. And yeah, so that loose adamant also necessary that I believe SVJ just retrieved again. Or did he, this is his first time in.
I believe it's SVJ's first time, and I believe Sonny Rath picked it up previously.
Yeah, thank you. Alright, so we are continuing to kind of make our circuit of the world. And I believe we are still looking for our shop item. Isn't that right?
I don't recall seeing a shop item yet.
Yeah. So, the shop item, in the normal game, you have to go to that random tile that Dangwu just... It's an oasis. And there is a shop there where you can buy a bottle that has a fairy in it. In Final Fantasy Randomizer, one of the things that shuffle the location of the shop that has a key item for sale, as well as what that key item is. And we call that the vendor item. And it's looking like at this point that's gotta be at OnRack. Because I think we've seen all of the vendors, and that's the...
Yeah, I believe that's the only one we're missing.
Yeah. And Dangwu's about to confirm that. Also, I don't see what these Argoyles have, but St. Von Jester's been getting into these long fights with them.
The problem with
have a lot of
Argoyles...
defense?
They're unrunnable for one. And number two,
Well,
Argoyles are one of the more annoying enemies in the game. They tend to have bad defense, they resist a fair amount of elements. They're just annoying.
And they hit a lot, but it's mostly the fact that St. Von Jester's been using the Bane Sword exclusively. And I'm wondering if that means that they have, like, ridiculous amounts of absorb.
Yeah, at this point the Bane Sword might just be faster than whatever weapons we're swinging. But meanwhile, while we were focused on Argoyles, Dangwu in OnRack managed to find the elusive vendor item. We found the tail, which we need to turn into Bahamut to class change our party, for the low price of 20,000 gold.
I mean, that's pretty nice to, like, win the favor of the King of all Dragons. Like, you know, I mean, it's not pocket change, but it's not a bad price.
I mean, for reference, treasure chests in the game that contain only gold can contain as little as 1 gold, and they can contain as much as 65,535 gold.
And I mean, we've actually seen several chests that are in the, like, 8 to 9,000 range, so it is very convenient.
So what are some of the benefits to promoting with the melee classes, like the fighter and the thief?
So, the fighter and the thief do gain access to better equipment, especially the thief. And also gain access to low-level magic. And so that comes in very handy. For example, when you have a seed like this, where life is in a spot where knights can learn it. Because that knight is probably going to survive most of the fights that you're getting into. And so you kind of want to be able to strap that fighter in with life as early as you can, which means for promoting them as quickly as you can. Because that also means your knight is going to be able to just kind of strap on the good equipment you find and be nearly killable. However, the black belt's a little bit different. Isn't that right, Fizzle?
So, with the black belt, in the vanilla game, the black belt has some weird stats to it that almost disincentivizes you from doing a class change with it. And let me just briefly explain why. Every class character, when they level up, they get a fixed amount of magic defense to their character. And for all non-black belt classes, they get the same regardless of whether they're promoted or not. But for the black belt, they get 4 points of magic defense when they're a black belt, but only get 1 point of magic defense when they're the upgraded form, the master. So there's some strategy to not upgrading your black belt until he has enough levels to have enough magic defense that it's worth the time and trouble.
So, just to quickly interrupt you, we found a second ribbon in the waterfall, and the robot gave us Matoya's crystal.
Yeah, Matoya's crystal, that's another one of those items that you can just trade in to get a incentive item. So that is going to be an interesting thing to see play out. We might not actually necessarily see someone turn that in right away. Just because where they are now at the waterfall, I'm not sure it's necessarily... Well, Fizzle, would you say it's on their path, or would you say that they might not bother to run back and turn that in right away to Matoya until they're heading to something on the South Continent?
It all depends on how prepared you feel for other dungeons on the Northern Continent. The two big ones being, are we prepared for Sea Shrine? Well, we don't have an Oxyel, so we can't do that. Are we prepared for the Mirage Tower and the Sky Castle? We have the Chime. Most of us have the Cube. We could at least, from a logistical standpoint, like, get from start to end of dungeon. But can we survive that dungeon? Well, there's a lot of big nasty things in there, and we might not be able to do that. But there's the potential. There's also the tiny side dungeon, the Castle of Ordeals. We know that's an incentive location.
Which makes it not so tiny.
We know that it's pretty short-ish, depending. And it's kind of right in our path. But are we really looking for something for that crystal to turn into right now versus going and opening more boxes right now?
And Ordeals does have a lot of boxes, and the fights there are not that bad. The biggest issue is getting through the Pillar Maze. So, speaking of getting through things, Dangwoo is in a little bit of trouble right now, in case no one's noticed. His red mage, the aptly named Woat, is currently trying to get out of a waterfall cave where he's run out of life charges and friends.
I mean, we introduced Red Mage as the best class, so this is fine. Everything's fine.
Actually, wait a moment. He has 4 life charges. Why? Dang.
Now, let me play devil's advocate here. The thing that he might be doing is that, unlike most other Final Fantasy games, where magic is on an MP system, as long as you have MP to cast it, you just cast it, Final Fantasy 1 is on a spells per level system, and you only get charges per level based on what level that mage is. So he might be grinding up that red mage to a higher level so that we can get more charges on the levels that we want to have more charges for.
Another possibility is he may have gone for the big brain play there. Okay, the fact he's going back to the clinic to revive everyone, I think he just forgot he had life on the red mage. But he accidentally did do a big brain play there, because you don't start learning spells on the Knight and the Ninja, the upgraded fighter, until level 15. And then you gain a spell slot every other level after level 15. If you are level 15, if you turn level 15 after class change. Otherwise, it's, I think, the first odd-numbered level after you class change that you get that first spell slot, or is it just the first level up?
It's every odd level after 15, until you get 4.
So, you don't necessarily want to have your fighter, your thief, above level 15, before class change, because that delays you getting up to the 4 spell slots you can have. I don't know if that was actually Dang's plan, but if that wasn't his plan, he accidentally made it look like he is the smartest man in the world by not reviving his party there, and just letting that red mage haul them out. And you know what? I think I'm going to choose to believe that. That is my new canon.
Sure, that's fine. Caleb, do you have any opinions on Dengwu's secret genius?
Dangwoo might be a secret genius. He might be playing the big brain play of all and just fooling us all into thinking that he's some just out here for fun guy. But I think Dangwoo is smarter than we give him credit for a lot of the times. One of the things I want to talk about specifically Dangwoo's strategy, he's one of the few runners on stream that has a thief with him. But I heard that the thief wasn't any good to run in Final Fantasy. Is there something that happened that made them better?
Ah, that is an excellent point. Our fantastic dev team, which basically is open to anyone who wants to learn assembly, and I believe we are now C, Objective-C, that's it, are the 2 languages that are required. But our magnificent dev team has introduced a balance change based on how Thief has been modified in later versions of Final Fantasy I. Thieves normally in Final Fantasy I gain +2 to their hit percent every time they gain a level. And hit percent is kind of a catch-all stat. It determines your likelihood to hit things, but it also determines how many swings you get. And how many swings you get in turn determines how much damage you do, because every time you swing, there's another damage calculation made. So if you get a lot of hits in, you have a higher chance of getting more critical hits in, and everything you hit rolls its own damage dice. And it's a complicated equation that no one really cares about, except to know more hits, good. So having a +2 hit percent, not so good. Because it just basically means you're always lagging behind the fighter and the black belt who get +3, and, you don't even have really that much magic to balance out like the mages who also are +2 get. So it is, we just doubled the thief's hit percent. Now the thief is at +4. It is the fastest hit gain in the game. And what that means is the thief is kind of this, critical hit machine. You hand the thief a sword that has pretty good crit rate, or even just a sword that has pretty good damage on it, and you just kind of let the thief swing away at things, and they're going to do pretty good damage. The fighter's still going to hit a little bit harder, they've got more strength, but the thing is the thief's likely to go first, and the thief's also going to be able to run away. So you can put the thief in the front of your party and make it harder for things to ambush you, make it easier to ambush them. Basically the thief's kind of this sort of, gadget class in a lot of ways, with that buff to its hit percent. So yeah, no, Thief is good now. It's definitely not a no-brainer play by any stretch of the imagination, but if you know how to use a Thief effectively, it can be very strong, especially in terms of letting you kind of pick fights that have a high value. And I see I have stunned you to silence.
But then why is SVJ's thief dead?
I can answer that one. So, everything Wout just said is 100% correct. The thief can be an amazing crit machine if they get a good weapon. Now, the contingent statement there is if they get a good weapon. Thieves by themselves, the strongest thing they can equip, not counting the Mass Mune, is like a Coral Sword, which is weaker than a Silver Sword that a fighter could just buy at the store. So, committing to a Thief for damage means committing to a class change. Now, because we know that there's items in incentive locations, we can attempt to bank on the fact that either the tail is a loose item that we don't need, or we can skip a whole dungeon once we have all the key items we know we need because we know that the tail is there and we don't care about it.
But Saint Von Jester just found a Vorpal sword in the Temple of Ordeals. Is that a good enough sword for a ninja?
Yes, but no, but yes, because the Vorpal is a strictly worse version of the katana, the thief ultimate weapon that only the thief can equip. Both the katana and the Vorpal are the only high crit weapons in the game. They have something ridiculous like a 30% crit rate chance. So if you put that in the hands of someone who swings much more often, you get many more crits, and it's a very bursty damage class. But that still brings us back to the question of, do we spend the time hunting down the tail? And if we decide against that, well, if we just leave that thief face down, because of the way that Final Fantasy I calculates experience, those 3 living party members are going to be getting 33% more experience than they otherwise would be, so they'll get stronger by the time we get to the end of the game.
So go ahead.
We did find a rod, and we did find a bottle. So we found the rod in the Temple of Ordeals, and we found a bottle from the slab turn-in from Matoya. Just keeping you guys up to date.
Yeah, okay. Here's the question. Why do we need some dirty old stick that was just in this old ruined castle? Like, that doesn't seem very useful.
So the rod is useful in the Earth Cave. There are several items that have plain enough sounding names, like the chime, who needs a bell? The rod, why do we need a stick? The bottle, I don't need to put things in a bottle. But in Final Fantasy I, those common items turn into things that are much, much more important. We need the chime to get into the Mirage Tower, one of the major Fiend dungeons. In Earth Cave, one of the other major Fiend dungeons, about halfway down on the 3rd floor, there is a massive plate that's covering the stairs to progress further into the dungeon. You need the rod to remove that plate. So, at this point, we're just collecting all the key items that we need for bosses, and then eventually when we have them all, we'll enter effectively go mode, and then it's a question of, are we comfortable with our gear, or do we want to open more boxes for more ribbons, for better armor, etc.
Yeah, so, okay, that actually brings a point I don't think we've actually discussed yet. What are we trying to do in this game?
Go fast.
Yes, Fizzle, I know we're trying to go fast. Now, so the goal of Final Fantasy I is ultimately to defeat Chaos, who is this big, buff, giant dude with wings who has basically been destroying the world. But in order to do that, we first have to deal with the Fiends of the Elements, Lich, Carrie, Kraken, and Tiamat, who have each gained control of one that basically control nature. And so, in order to do that, we have to invade each of their dungeons. The Earth Cave, the Volcano, the Sea Shrine, and Mirage Tower and the Fortress. 3 of those dungeons, as Caleb was alluding to, have something blocking them. In the case of Earth Cave, you have to have the rod to move a slab in order to actually get down into Lich. To get into Mirage Tower, you must have a chime, and to get to the Floating Fortress, you must have a cube to activate a teleportation pad. Trust me, it makes sense in context. And then you have the Sea Shrine, which is basically at the bottom of the ocean. It sank 200 years ago. And so you have to have something called Oxyale so you can breathe down there, because, as it turns out, the Light Warriors do not have gills.
Not yet, but the dev team is working on it.
I mean, they can have gills if we shuffle it around, because then you just go into Sea Shrine without the Oxyale. But that's more complicated than what we're doing here. But the long and short of it is, you must have those 3 items in order to complete those 3 dungeons. So, yeah. Basically, though, the only runner on screen who has the rod is one of the only runners not in Earth Cave. I just realized. Silverfire has the rod. They are not in Earth Cave. St. Von Jester and Sonirath do not have the rod. They are both digging into Earth. Why is that?
It's all about calculated gambles. They know they're looking for a loose item. They don't know what it is. They don't know where it is. At this point, there is enough boxes in Earth Cave that they've made the gamble that maybe this is kind of a trolley seed and the rod is going to be somewhere in Earth Cave. Failing that, they might at least get the loose item that they're missing, and then they know, because we found the adamant earlier, that we don't need to look for loose items anymore. So at least they'll have that information, even if they have to return to the dungeon at a later time.
No. There is that, and there's also the fact that just before that slab that we need the rod to move, there is a key item. We have Earth Cave incentivized for this flag set. And so... Okay, apparently there was a slight mix-up on the tracker. SVJ does have the rock.
But
so,
whoa, SVJ is going in through this Earth Cave and stepping on tiles that I know are supposed to be Earth elementals, but different things are there. And it's not a spike tile I've ever seen before.
Oh, you're talking about our spike tile shuffle. Now, there are two kinds of spike tile shuffle in Final Fantasy I Randomizer. There is the spike tile shuffle that just shuffles all the tiles that are in the game together. And then there's what we call our B-side spike tile shuffle. And that gets into some complicated things about how Final Fantasy I decides what fights you're going to get into in locations. And the easiest way to explain it is, every fight in the game is like a record. It has an A side and a B side. And some dungeons play the A side of the encounter, and other dungeons play the B side. And so what we have done, or what our dev team has done, is say, alright, all the spike tiles in the game, all these encounters where you get a fight every time you step on this tile, with few exceptions, they're now, instead of pulling from what's supposed to be there, or just the list of what all the normal spike tiles are, they just pull from all those B-side tracks. And they can play any record in the game, and almost all of them are terrible.
I mean, terrible's an opinion. So, for me personally, I much prefer B-side trap tiles over anything else, because there are so many of the highest experience encounters in the game, if you can survive them, that if you're looking to get levels in a hurry, and you find one of these tiles that's worth buckets of experience, then you can just hit the tile over and over and over again, and get levels over and over and over again to try and catch up and make up time elsewhere.
Yeah, but then sometimes you wind up in a situation where one of those really difficult encounters pops up, 5 minutes into the game when you have an incentivized marsh cave. And then you are angry about everything forever.
Sometimes it's not that.
Very true. However, like Fizzle said before, the big thing about Final Fantasy is, in general, you don't care about the big fights. Like, folks who are familiar with the game might have noticed, we didn't pay any attention when, let's see, I believe it was, Dengwu went over to Northwest Castle and murdered the king who lived there, who turned out to be the Dark Elf Astos. Spoilers. In the vanilla game, Astos is a big roadblock. He knows a couple of very powerful spells, and he has a lot of defense. He's just really hard to take down. First of all, you have a lot of tools that you don't have in the game to make Astos easy, but it's also just one of those things where you can save right outside Astos, and you probably have a couple of tools that just make him very easy to blast past. Whereas any given dungeon in this game, you're looking at 3 to 7 or 9 floors that, as we pointed out, can have literally anything on there. You could have a that can stun you or cast frost on you, and both of those are horrible things. And you have to get past possibly several sets of those, and then the werewolves that cast sleep might pop up right after you've managed to squeeze past those. And so it's one of those things where that extends to spike tiles. If the spike tiles can pull from any of those B-sides just about, you can wind up in a situation where, you know, yeah, it might just be an easy XP farm, or it can be this horrible nightmare with 400 HP and way too much defense because it rolled really well, and oh god, how am I going to get past this? And see, those are the moments I actually live for, so I enjoy them, but other people can see them as a bad thing.
No, it's a good risk-reward gamble system. That can kind of troll you sometimes because you don't get the knowledge immediately. Sometimes things will have very little health and you'll think, hooray, this is a fantastic grind spot. And then 4, 5, 7, 12 encounters in, you realize, oh, they actually all have an ability that will destroy my party if they cast it, and this is the first time I'm seeing them cast it. And I haven't saved in 3, 4, 7, 15 battles.
Oh hey, that's weird. It looked like Earth Cave there, apparently just, had a lady in the lake somewhere? Because I thought I just saw something called an Excalibur.
So Excalibur is the quote-unquote best sword in the game for the knight, the upgraded class of the fighter. It has advantage. Well, I say advantage, that's a poor term. It does more damage against every single enemy type in the game. Worth noting, not all enemies have a type. In fact, there are several enemies that don't have a type. And it has some of the highest attack power with fine accuracy. But personally, I rate the Massmune as being better than Excalibur, because even without the ability to deal more damage against every enemy type, just the extra power just does so much more.
Yeah, now it is important to note there that when we say enemy type, in addition to those 8 elements, there are also 8 enemy varieties, which I don't have memorized because it only comes up for a handful of weapons. What the Excalibur does is it basically is flagged to say, I damage everything, I do extra damage to everything of this type. And also, I target every elemental vulnerability in the game. And so basically, if something can have a weakness, the Excalibur does extra damage to it. And so, basically, the Excalibur is a really powerful sword, right up until the end of the game. At which point, you're suddenly fighting things that don't have types or elemental weaknesses, and suddenly Excalibur kind of stops being so useful. Which is a problem if you haven't found the Maza something else.
Sonnyrath found the Oxyale in the Ice Cave, so it looks like, with all the knowledge that we have, are we ready to beat the game?
Yes, but no. So, we have basically item no mode at this point. We know where everything that's needed because while we've been kind of blathering on about how Final Fantasy works, we did find the loot from the Elves, and the loot gives us the ability to move a different slab located in the Fiends, which also blocks our ability to progress into the dungeon. I mean, we're going to see the loot here in a moment, St. Von Jester's side. And so, we do have everything that we need to finish the game, item-wise. We can get to everywhere in the game now, in theory. Problem is, kind of what we've been reiterating several times. Enemies are still dangerous. So, what you need to actually get through the end game isn't just the items to open the doors. you also need the gear, the experience, and the spells to make it through whatever the end game can. And there are a few spells that I would say almost everyone agrees are kind of mandatory, at least ideal. One of those is a spell we saw right out, Fast. Fast doubles the amount of hits you get off of a swing weapon, and that translates into a lot of single-target damage. What about Temper and Saber? What do those do?
Well, if we're playing vanilla Final Fantasy 1, they do nothing. But one of the things our wonderful dev team has done is fixed all of the spells that never quite worked right, so now they do what they're supposed to. Temper is castable on any other target in the group and raises attack power by 14, whereas Saber is only castable on themselves, but it increases attack power by 16 and accuracy by 10.
So what that means, if I understand correctly, is it makes it a lot easier to hit enemies that are highly evasive, which a lot of the endgame bosses can be, and even some of the endgame normal ones.
So if those spells were broken and fixed, are all of the spells fixed?
Yeah. I don't believe there are any spells that still don't work. The closest we come to that are the spells that don't really do too much helpful. Spells like A Ice or A Fire. Basically, those are spells that are elementally defensive. And also spells that help with status effects that aren't really that much of a problem, like A Mute or Lamp, which remove the mute and dark statuses respectively. They're helpful in very niche situations, but 9 times out of 10, if you're in a situation where they would be helpful, you're probably about to die. And also probably can't use them anyway, because whoever is already...
So there's...
Go ahead.
So there's 3 fixed spells that I want to give special attention to, because they also do a lot to impact how some of these runs function. The first one is Exfer. In the vanilla game, Exfer didn't... It either always missed, or its accuracy was so low that it might as well always miss. What Exfer does now is it removes the resistances that an enemy has. It won't turn a neutral into a weakness, but it will turn a resistance into a neutral. So now suddenly, some of the fiends that resisted a certain insta-death spell, it takes you from 3 in 256 to maybe 6% chance to work, which is a pretty big jump, especially if it's something that you've judged that you can't kill melee-wise, or if you just want to roll the dice. The other 2 that I want to give attention to are Lock and Lock 2. And these are some of my favorite bugs from the original game. Lock 1 always missed. Like, in the code, it was basically set that when you cast Lock, it misses. That's it. And Lock 2 always hit, but instead of lowering enemy evasion, it raised enemy evasion. So those have been fixed to not only have the intended effects, but because of how important they are to sort of making it so that bosses are killable instead of just gambling on insta-kills, Lock and Lock 2 also have a 100% accuracy rate.
So
Yeah.
if those spells, like Exfer and Lock, work against enemies, when the enemies cast them on you, how does that impact stuff like using a ribbon?
Oh, if Exfer lands, oh, you're...
Yeah, that ribbon is now a 1 defense helmet. Congratulations.
Now, fortunately, there is a spell called Wall, that effectively gives you the same resistance as a ribbon does for the duration of one battle. So if you are unfortunate enough to get Exferred by something that isn't about to die, and you have Wall available, you can very, very quickly reapply Wall and hope that nothing bad happens in the next, round of combat. But speaking of defenses, St. Von Jester I just saw picked up something called a defense. The defense, I'm just gonna go ahead and explain this one. The defense is a weapon that casts the spell Ruse, which, we've been talking about Lock and Lock 2 and Evasion. So that's a good time to talk about Invis and Invisibility, Invis 2, and Ruse. Those are the spells that increase evasion. They're basically the opposite of Lock. And the way that attack rolls are handled, the way that the game determines whether or not an attack hits, there's basically kind of a point where your evasion is so high, the only way you can be hit is on a crit. And that breaking point is basically the equivalent of either 6 casts of Invis or Invis 2, or 3 casts of Ruse. And there are 2 items that cast evasive spells. There's the White Shirt, which when you use it casts Invis 2. It's also the best armor a white mage can get. And then there's the Defense Sword, which we just found. Or what SVJ just found. And the Defense Sword casts Ruse, which is twice as effective as Invis, but only affects the caster. So what that basically translates into is, if a character has the Defense Sword on their person, they basically have a button that says, if you don't kill me in 3 rounds, and I'm wearing a ribbon, you can't touch me. Except on an extremely low chance. Which basically, in Final Fantasy 1, means it's better to not be standing in the way of an attack than to be hit by it. And there's a couple of reasons for that, isn't there?
It really boils down to how attacks are calculated in Final Fantasy 1, and there's a lot of problems. So the first thing is that accuracy is capped, and then it subtracts evasion. And essentially what that means is that, as we just discussed, there's a point where your accuracy no longer matters in the face of the massive wall of evasion standing in front of you. But what it also means is that the less and less accuracy you have to work with, you start pushing down into the realm where the only hits against you are going to be crits. And if you evade cap, it just so happens that if an enemy attack should get through, it will crit you, and it will do a lot of damage because crits largely ignore armor. The second problem is several enemies in the game will have status touch attacks. Now, a lot of these will interact with either the elemental resist, like there's a lot of stun touch that you can just resist by having a ribbon. But there's things like death touch and stone touch that you aren't so lucky with. So if the crit happens to get through, there's also an even money shot that you just instantly turn to stone or instantly die.
So, I have a question. Who's winning this race right now?
That is an excellent question, and I believe the answer is not really anyone. Because, yeah, I mean, Fizzle, do you disagree with that? I think right now we kind of have a couple of runners are a little bit farther along in exploration, but everyone's kind of at about the same place.
So we're going through the world right now with our airship, and they're all doing the same things in slightly different order. But if we break down where these trackers are, there's a couple of things I want to point out. Silverfire, Dengwu, and SVJ all have one of the 4 orbs lit. You need all 4 orbs lit to get into the final dungeon. So for measurable progress, they're all at 25% of the goal of getting to Chaos. Now, measure that with the items that we need to open doors, to open dungeons. St. Von Jester and Sonirath both have the Oxyale, whereas Dengwu and Silverfire do not. So, if I'm reading their trackers correctly, they can... No, sorry. St. Von Jester also has the rod. So St. Von Jester can get into and complete every dungeon in the game. And they've already completed one of them. Sani Wrath is the next well, Sani Wrath, Dengwu, and Silverfire are all missing one item. Silverfire and Dengwu are missing the Oxyel, Sani Wrath is missing the Rod. So they're not that far behind as long as they can locate the items that they're missing.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where the locations of these items, you know, the Rod is a lot... Like, Sani Wrath is about to get the Rod. He is going to have item go mode in about, I don't know, 30 seconds. The thing is Silverfire and Dengwu have to get the, well, Dengwu just got the Oxy out, and Silverfire is about to get the Oxy. So, at this point, everyone is going to have item go. So, at that point, equipment becomes a factor. Who has what they need to get the game. And right now, we have 2 players with defense swords handy. So they have that evasion item at their disposal. No one has a white shirt, so they don't have that backup that can cast evasion over the entire... I don't actually know if we've seen ability. And the answer is we have seen in 1, and we have seen runes, so those are available as spells. But yeah.
A quick look at Dengwu's magic, and it looks like Invis 2 was level 4.
Okay, so they don't necessarily need those items. Equipment-wise, I think most of our runners at this point have at least bumped into the bracelet. I can't quite recall where that was. Was that the item at Astos?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So they have a decent enough in-game armor. And I think that most of them have found at least flame or ice armor, which is equivalent to the opal bracelet. So they have armor that will survive the game. Everyone but SVJ has found 2 runes, so they can protect a life caster and they can protect a damage dealer. Yeah, I'd say honestly, everyone's kind of in go mode at this point. Kind of just a matter of who can clear these dungeons quickly. Dengwu just killed Carrie to get the fire orb. Silverfire is on their way down to kill Carrie. Sani is apparently deciding to start with Sky, and I think SVJ is right behind him. And Dang is on his way into Sky as well. This is... So... What's interesting about this, what's interesting about this is, basically, because they've done Earth and Fire first, Dang and Silverfire are looking at having to figure out the longest dungeons before they hit, you know, the end game. Sani is starting with the longest dungeon, and SVJ is not too far behind him. Sani is going to be able to just kind of blow through the rest of the game, basically. Whereas Sil and Dang are going to be slowed down a little bit because they have to get these longer dungeons before they hit. But I think Dang still has enough of a lead, just because Sani doesn't have any of those orbs lit. But SVJ, on the other hand, he doesn't keep checking chests in Sky, could catch up to Dang and kind of hit Temple of Fiends at the same time.
So what are some things that our runners should be on the lookout for when they get into the Temple of Fiends?
Basically...
Or wait, can I interrupt you real quick?
Go ahead.
Where is Sani Wrath?
He was on the teleport.
Looks like...
Go ahead.
It looks like he's on a very important bridge.
Ah, yes, this is the Bridge of Destiny. This is the single highest encounter rate in the entire game reserves. But it is also where the legendary war mech can be encountered. Where is it?
So just to touch on something we were talking about earlier, that it isn't the bosses necessarily you need to watch out for, it's the trash encounters. War mech is one of the most infamous encounters in the game because it is a trash encounter that is frequently as hard, if not harder, than the final boss, Chaos. Now, his native environment is this Bridge of Destiny, and you have a 1 in 64 chance of when you get one of these encounters that you will find a war mech. And because that's not good enough for us, we decided to randomize that to make it possibly more or less likely.
However, in this case, you're not going to see a war mech, because in these flags, war mech is set to what we call patrol. There's an NPC wandering around on the before the Bridge of Destiny, the one that Dangwoo is about to hit. It is a robot sprite. If you talk to the robot sprite, it will yell at you, and then you will fight war mech. Now, obviously, there's nothing that obliges the runners to encounter war mech. Except, it is possible that, I don't know, if we were to be participating in some sort of event where we could donate funds to make people do things, I could see a situation where they might say, hey, you have to fight war mech, and oh hey, look! Here's a war mech fight, just wandering around here on the Bridge of Destiny, in this giant floor that loops around and is infinite in its scale. Good luck finding the robot and killing it. And, it's one of those things that adds a little bit of time. You have to find war mech and then defeat war. And Dangwoo right now is hunting for that war mech. So we're going to keep an eye on that until he finds it. Which, unfortunately, might be a little challenging because it has the, I think, second highest encounter rate in the game.
I believe it's even with every other encounter zone for dungeons.
I could have sworn that Sky has a little bit of build, but, I mean, I'm not an expert, so...
So one other thing to note real quick, we've talked up a mighty game for this war mech, and it's super deadly, it's super rare, and now we can talk to it and provoke a confrontation. Why on earth would anyone ever do that aside from for the yucks? It's because war mech also rewards the most experience of anything in the game, such as to the point where even with our parties in the mid-20s, it's highly likely that even if all 4 members of the party make it through, all 4 of them will get 2 to 3 levels off of just this one fight.
And speaking of just this one fight, Dangwoo has found a robot hanging out in random... And note how he is healing up all the way. And going ahead and putting that ninja up front, and it's an unrunnable today. Is that always the case with patrolling, or is this just, icing on the cake for the fans at home?
I think it might always be unrunnable when it's patrolling, but since it's a fight that you provoke yourself, it would make sense that it was unrunnable.
Yeah, and you can see Dangwoo is pulling no punches. He is building up defense on the fighter. He is speeding him up. He is casting tempers. He is basically making sure that when that fighter swings Asumune, it is going to hurt. Yeah, see, that was 3 hits for 232 damage. That's a lot of damage. But wait, he's fasted and he's got a Maza. That's not good. That means this is a very evasive war mech, and you can see on Silverfire's screen the same business going down. No, that was with Xcal, never mind. But that was also a paper... that had to have been less than 1,000 HP on that war mech, because that was like a 250 HP hit and 600 HP hit.
Yeah, outside of melee strength, I didn't really see anything dangerous about that war mech, but that's that's another point about the War Mech fight that I want to bring up. That's another hidden benefit. So in the Final Fantasy 1 randomizer, we send spells all over the place, we send skills all over the place, but we do have one self-contained pool of things where we just keep all the deadly stuff. All of the Fiend 2 fights in Temple of Fiends Revisited, as well as Chaos, as well as War Mech, all share the same pool for who gets certain random skills and abilities. So when you're fighting a War Mech, you can see things that will give you an idea of what you can expect in the Temple of Fiends Revisited. For example, if War Mech casts Nuke on you, well, there's only 3 of those in the pool, so we know that there's at least one Nuke that's not going to be in Temple of Fiends Revisited, if we survive. By the same token, if we see War Mech cast a bunch of Lightning 2s and Fire 2s, well, those are the weakest spells we could expect, so that tells us that Topher is going to be a very uphill battle.
Yeah. The best spell that I can think of to see on a War Mech, with some caveats, is Cure 4. There's exactly one Cure 4 that was just described. That exactly one is normally on Chaos. Cure 4 is a spell that completely heals the target. You don't want to see that on the final boss of the video game after you just run through the gauntlet. Or even on, like, a really hard boss that you just ran through the gauntlet. I personally like to see it on War, because you know what? It's a lot easier to run back up Sky because you died to a War Mech that has Cure 4 than to go through all of Temple.
I mean, my personal favorite time to see Cure 4 is on probably Chaos or Tiamat 2, and I see them cast it while I'm still in the process of buffing my party, so I haven't actually done any damage yet, because that tells me that it's in their rotation, and maybe I should layer on a couple more tempers before I start swinging, just to make sure that they go down before they get their next cast off.
Yeah, the only reason I don't like to see that is because they do have the possibility of a short spell script.
If a Temple of Fiends Revisited Fiend has a spell script, it will be 8 spells long, but there will be one Fiend that has no spells whatsoever, so it's either 8 or nothing.
Alright, so it's just the skill list that can be truncated.
The skill list, likewise, is 4 or nothing.
Okay. Alright. See, this is why we keep Fizzlebeef around. He knows things.
It might have duplicates, so it'll seem like there's not many, but it's either 4 or nothing for skills or 8 or nothing for spells.
I feel smart because I knew that too.
Well, Fizzlebeef said it first, so he gets...
I'm Fizzlebeef.
It's true, he was Fizzlebeef earlier, but I have since taken the crown back.
Oh.
I apparently don't know people's voices as well. I feel really stupid right now.
Don't feel stupid, Woat.
Anyway, so, like I said, it is one of those things where,
Oh! Dangwu found a power bonk in a very free chest.
oh yeah, I think everyone's gonna find that. The advantage of the power bonk, before I say my thing.
The power bonk casts the saber spell, what Fizzle was talking about earlier, and makes you swing a little bit harder, and it will actually increase your hits a little bit over time too.
Yeah. So, what I was going to point out, so we are in a very interesting position. Sonny just has the fire orb to light. Dangwu and Silverfire just need to get that water orb. The fire orb, the volcano, if you are not opening any boxes, that's a 2-minute dash. Kraken we've already seen from St. Von Jester, not a threat. Or no, it was Sani, not a threat. Especially with the levels and experience we have. So, Silverfire and Dangler are going to be the first two into Temple of Fiends. Sani is going to be at most probably a minute and a half to 2 minutes behind them, depending on how quickly he gets through this dungeon. Like how many fights he gets into, which, that's one thing we haven't brought up, is damage tiles. Normally, it's a bad idea to run on things that hurt you, but in Final Fantasy I, damage tiles have a very useful property. You can't get into fights while you're walking. Which is why the astute viewer has noticed every time anyone's gone into Volcano, they have deliberately run their party through, the molten blood of the earth. Because that means you don't get into as many fights. Which, it's faster to just heal up the 1 HP per step damage from these lava tiles than it is to deal with any fight.
Can I go back to the power bonk real quick, Woe?
Shoot.
The power bonk in this flag set is actually incentivized. So what they found was a loose power bonk in a very free chest. Very low chance for that to happen.
That is an excellent point, Caleb. See, I've learned now.
And knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm. Knowledge is very power, and I did forget one thing. Dango and Silver still had to walk back from Onrak to their airships and then fly back to Temple of Fiends. Sani is right at his airship, and Temple of Fiends is basically next to the volcano from airship perspective. Sani is not going to be a minute and a half behind. Sani is going to be the Temple of Fiends in very short order. This is going to be a tight race going into the final stretch. And it's one of those things, if anything in Temple of Fiends Gatekeeper, has a lot of high damage spells, has a lot of defense or evasion, SVJ can still sweep up from behind, because he just has to kill Kraken, go do that, sprint through Volcano, Dang, don't scare me like that. So you can talk to the doors that are locked by the Mystic Key, and it will give you the same message that it would give you if you didn't have the Mystic Key and bumped into it. So Danglu decided to have a little bit of a lark and not just run through the door. And I will never forgive him for that. But yeah,
okay.
Anyway, the point I was trying to make, SVJ is going to have much higher level characters than everyone else. And that's going to matter if, say, Nuke comes out. I think that's something I think we've really spoken to this entire... Why is it that spells are much better in the beginning of the game than they are at...
So, one of the things to note is that spell damage doesn't scale with any character stat. Spell damage is a very fixed, it does X to Y. Lightning 2, I believe, is like, it does 35 to 108. It's somewhere in there, nothing that the player controls can affect that. It's all about rolling to hit versus their magic defense on whether it goes higher on damage or lower on damage. So, with spells like Fade and Nuke, they're the highest damage spells in the game, this is true. They have the highest accuracy, this is true. But whereas in the beginning of the game, we're going up against things with, 0 to 40 magic defense, here where it matters, in the Temple of Fiends Revisited, we have the Trash that has the 100 to 150 magic defense, and then we have the Fiends that have 200 magic defense. So those spells are going to hit less often, and they're going to roll less damage on average.
Point of order. Not all the Fiends have very good magic defense. Dangwu just applied what is lovingly called by some members of Dang strats, which other people might call split strats, or just meme strats. He zapped Lich. Zap is one of those instant kill spells. It's time elemental. Nothing resists time element except, I think, chaos?
Correct.
Zap has a very low accuracy. However, nothing is well defended against it except by their magic defense. Lich 2 does not have very good magic defense. So, you know how in most RPGs, like Final Fantasy IV, heck, I think even Dragon War, very powerful enemies have, tremendous defenses against, anything you can use to abbreviate the battle, to make it nice and quick and to the point. That doesn't happen in Final Fantasy 1. Final Fantasy 1 doesn't have boss bits. Final Fantasy 1 just have bosses that have really, really stats. But you can still 3 and 256 boss. You can still exploit low magic defense to just take them out. I know I once ran a race against Dangwood where he didn't have to deal with a Stonewall Lich 2 because he just hit him with the Quake spell first round, killed him, moved on with his life. I didn't.
I mean,
I've also never forgiven him for that. There's a lot of things I've never forgiven Dangwood.
I mean, really, that just speaks more to the fact that Lich 2 is not a real boss than anything else. Lich 2 has, as you said, Lich 2 has much lower magic defense than the other Fiend 2s. Lich 2 has fewer hit points, fewer defense, negligible attack. Even if it happens to roll a super deadly spell, you just kind of poke it and it falls over and you go on with your day.
Yeah. Now, that being said, even the real bosses, like I said, you always have a chance of killing instant death. It's often a low chance because they usually have enough magic defense and resistance to make it a non-issue, but there's always a chance, and you do sometimes see runners have these come-from-behind victories because, they were getting into a fiend fight when their opponent was finishing that same fight, but they just first turn were just like, I'm just going to throw Break out there and see what happens. And then Break worked, and the Fiend is dead, and now they're right on their heels, and, their opponent burned all these resources getting through this hard fight, and they didn't have to. Speaking of hard fights, ladies and gentlemen, Kraken 2. Kraken 2 is what we like to call the first of the gatekeepers. Kraken has a lot of hits. Kraken has a lot of defense. Kraken tends to hit hard. Kraken can have a lot of HP. Dangwu just got through that by basically piling a ludicrous amount of damage onto that fighter.
Kraken 2 is always an interesting fight because there's always the kind of internal scale of, do I want the boss to melee, or do I want the boss to cast a skill? And for Lich 2, and even Carry 2 most of the time, that scale leans a lot harder to, I would rather this boss meleeed, because there are so many deadly skills and spells I don't want to deal with. With Kraken 2, outside of, Nuke and Nuclear, if Kraken 2 is casting a spell or a skill, I am extremely happy, because that's not 9 hits for 1 billion damage.
Because, yeah, what you were saying earlier about spells having kind of this hard cap to how well they can do, Melee doesn't have that. Melee, you can just keep stacking damage on, just keep, you can't keep stacking hits, but you can get a lot of hits on someone. And, yeah, you can wind up in a position where, something can just hit, 17 hits. 1,500 damage. Your max HP is 999 and that's bad. But the same token, you can do that to bad guys too. And I think we are probably going to see that here on Chaos, because generally speaking, people just tend to kind of pile up the melee damage onto Chaos and call it a day. So let's turn our attention to Dangwu for this. I guess I'll fizzle if you don't mind.
All right, we're going to open this fight. We cast a Fast. We're now casting a Temper. We're going to cast Lock 2 to reduce Chaos's evasion. And how about a Power Gauntlet? We're going to layer up these melee buffing buffs on the Knight so that we can get way more damage out of that Knight than we ordinarily would. Chaos tried to punch the Black Mage, did next to nothing. Let's go into this next round. We're going to swing out of the gate. 9 hits, 768 damage. And we're still going to raise that attack power with Temper. Nuke for just under 200. Another nuke for just over 200. Down goes the Black Mage, but with the amount of damage that that Knight is doing, it probably doesn't matter. Nuke comes out, 208. Knight swings, 8 hits for 580. Chaos is still there. This is a large HP Chaos. Another nuke for 182. Chaos is still there. Let's try 2 nukes and a fade. Incoming Nuclear, a non-elemental AoE that really hurts. Down goes the Red Mage. The Knight counterattacks, but Chaos is still there. The Ninja swings, 3 hits, 3 damage. This is why some of us don't like Thieves. The Ninja tries a zap, but it doesn't quite work. The Knight swings in 8 hits, 520 damage, and down goes Chaos.
And that is going to have Dangwu finishing first here with a time of 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 53 or so seconds. And
on the top left of our screen, we have yet another Chaos fight. We're going with lots of Tempers onto a Knight. We're going to see a similar strategy here. We have a Cure 4 so that we can fill our HP out of the gate. That Knight just swung 10 hits for over 1,000 damage. That Knight has more power even than the last one that we saw. And we're going to stack yet more Tempers. We're just going to get this Knight's attack power into orbit. Temper goes off, swing goes out, 7 hits, 1595 damage. Chaos is still there, I suspect for not much longer. Knight swings, 8 hits for 1146, and down goes Chaos, just behind Dangwu.
yeah, that is going to be a finish of an hour 30 minutes, 4 seconds. So basically less than a minute between the two of them. And now you might be sitting over there, wow, why did they pile all of that damage onto that Knight? And the answer is, under these flags, Chaos can have 4,000 HP. You need every single point of damage you can drop onto Chaos. Speaking of dropping points in the Chaos, Sony Wrath has now made it to Chaos.
We've got defense going off. We're going to take an alternate strategy here. We're going to get defensive casts up before we worry about attacking. 2 ruses as well as a fast and a temper. Chaos is not impressed, takes out the Black Mage immediately. We're going to start tempering. Defense goes up, that's 2 ruse stacks on the Knight. Temper goes off. Ruse stacks, that's 2 ruse stacks on the White Mage. Chaos still gets a punch in, 1 hit for 92 damage. We're going to still work on tempers, and we're going to get that White Mage evade capped. That Knight is swinging a Vorpal, that was 6 hits, 94 damage. We're going to need some more attack power on that. The Knight's going to continue to swing. The Red Mage is going to use the second to last temper charge. And the White Mage is going to Thor Hammer. Thor Hammer goes off, 19 damage. Chaos unfortunately resists lightning, but the Vorpal swings in 7 hits, 751. That's more in the direction we were hoping for. Chaos tries some lightning 2 of his own, but it doesn't do that much damage. Thor Hammer goes off, 25 damage. Temper goes off, let's swing. 8 hits for 1113. Those crits are working overtime. The Red Mage is out of temper charges. The White Mage is going to try some more Thor Hammer. Chaos hits the Red Mage for 200, but it's still there. Nuke goes off. Thor Hammer goes off. Swing. 7 hits, 819. Chaos is still there. We're going to try Nuke, Thor Hammer, and swing again. Swing, 5 hits, 682. Down goes Chaos.
Yeah, that's going to be good for a finish of 1 hour, 32 minutes, and 48 seconds. So, 3 of our runners finish within about 3 minutes of each other. 2 minutes, really. And I believe all 3 of them have joined us in here. Good game, all 3 of you.
I could not have hoped for a better submission video with just like such a close race at the end. Even though I made what I would consider some major mistakes.
Yeah, so I was gonna wait until SVJ got in here, but I can't that long. So, how many of you stomachs dropped when you saw that TNT led straight to the?
Mine certainly did.
Mine
Especially
did not.
because.
Mine-
Well, I had taken the time to go dive out the canal out of Marsh. With the sleep-locking wolves and frosty undead, and there was one other dangerous enemy in there. I want to say it was scorpions.
Werewolves have thunder, I believe.
Yeah. Eventually they would thunder, but first they would waste 30 seconds, 40 seconds just
sleeping.
spamming sleeping.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, to be completely honest, I mean, after getting the TNT from the old man, I said, let's go to Volcano. I get adamant. I'm like, all right, if nobody does this play, I'm looking good. And then, of course, the TNT led the floater, and I'm like, of course you would. Of course you would.
Yeah, now fortunately none of the four of you actually did just like, I'm gonna gamble on TNT right away. But it was one of those things where it was just like, as each of you kind of made your way over there, because I think there was like maybe a 5-minute gap between the first and last person to actually go talk to Narek, there was just this kind of, you could feel the slow migration to, oh god, how badly am I about to this? So
It sounds like that was mitigated by the fact that even though, we didn't go straight for it, we were all doing something productive during that time.
Oh yeah, no, like, yeah, all of you were doing something, mostly getting murdered in Marsh. Although there was the innovative getting murdered in Volcano strat, because it turned out that the fire tile was the Twilight Watch Party.
Wait, what was in Marsh? Because I never went down there. Was it exciting?
There was a loose canal. Werewolves were rude, but mostly in a time-wasting way. And
No, they were rude.
Okay. I spent one fight where it's just like, can I get a lit 2 off? Can I get a lit 2 off? And I was just sitting there for a minute, and then I just reset. I didn't even find out that they had thunder yet because I was just sleep locked.
Yeah, no, they were rude.
They were very rude.
Just
But that's, that kind of goes to like show why Marsh can be scary, because there's so many different enemies in it, and like any number of them can be an enemy that is really unfun to deal with. So like you have to be careful about doing those Marsh dives, and I like.
Hang on a moment though, because SVJ is going to get Chaos, and I want Fizzle to get one more of these off.
Yeah, all right.
Fizzle's called all the other 3, so I feel like he gets as well.
We're doing some
Plus
last-minute
SVJ.
Equipment rearranging. We're getting
Yeah,
our
so-
armor set to go.
He only ever found the one ribbon, didn't he?
I believe I only saw one ribbon, yeah.
Yeah, so this is exciting. But
And
I can
here
tell you this
we
much.
go. We're going to open
Yeah.
with a heal helmet, anticipating damage. We're going to fast that knight. We're going to Invis 2 defensive strats, and we're going to more defensive strats. Invis 2 goes off. We start getting those evasion stacks up. That knight is halfway to being capped. The heal goes off before anything happens, which is a little awkward, but it's fine. Chaos punches, apparently has poison touch. Hits the ninja for about 100. Let's try some temper. Let's try some more temper, and maybe some fight. The heal helmet goes off, does heal helmet things. Vorpal swing, 6 hits, 150 damage, gonna need a bit more. Chaos tries to rub, but that doesn't work. 2 tempers go off. Next, we're gonna try more heal helmet. How about some temper? Maybe follow that up with fasting the red wizard, and a couple more defense stacks. Chaos punch almost takes down the black mage. Heal helmet goes off. Does a little bit to fix that injury, but that black mage is still on one leg. The fast goes off. We're going to try heal helmet. We're going to try nuke. How about some temper on the red mage? And some fight. Lightning 2 goes off. Down goes the ninja. Nuke goes off. 106 damage, that's pretty low. Vorpal Swing, 4 hits, 213. And the red mage tempers itself. Next round, we're going to fire the last nuke. We're going to try some heal 2 and a swing. Vorpal Swing, 6 hits for 508. We're getting there. Heal 2 goes off, tries to repair some of this damage. Fire 3 happens, down goes the black mage, and that red mage takes a lot of damage. Vorpal Swing, 2 hits, 63, that's the wrong direction. Mazza Swing, 7 hits, 223, and Chaos has Gear 4. Let's reset that tracker, try all this over again. Vorpal Swing, 7 hits for 465. Nuclear comes out. That red mage is not long for this world. Mazza Swing doesn't do much. Next round, Vorpal Swing. 4 hits, 352. Down goes the red mage. We got one person left. It's Vorpal versus Chaos. 4 hits, 309. Does some work. 6 hits, 698 does some work. Chaos tries Quad X. That's not going to do anything. 7 hit. 8 hits, 769. Doesn't quite get there. Zap doesn't work. Stun doesn't work. That Vorpal's chipping away. 4 hits, 261. We're just going to keep grinding away at this, but 5 hits for 340 does it. SVJ takes down Chaos.
And SVJ finishes in about an hour, 39 minutes, and 18 seconds. And yeah, that is one of the... That's kind of the interesting thing, because Cure was White Mage locked this seed. So, once SVJ kind of got into that danger zone, it was basically do or die. With emphasis on the or die. But yeah, so that's going to at least do it for our runners there, all finishing in under an hour and minutes, which that's great. And we're going to see if we can get SVJ up here as well to kind of chat a little bit. But anyway, still, sorry to cut you off. What are you saying?
No, I was really excited about that chaos fight. I don't remember what I was saying. I just watched a beautiful chaos fight that had me at the edge of my seat.
You all put on beautiful chaos fights and timed them so that Fizzle was able to get to all of you. It was actually kind of impressive now that I think about it. But hey, SVJ, GG.
Oh my god. What was the beginning of that seed?
Speaking of the beginning of the seed, I already asked the other but did your stomach drop when you turned in...
Sorry, what?
Did your stomach drop when you turned in the TNT and realized how quick it had floater?
How quickly I could have got the floater? Yeah.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I'll just turn on that TNT real quick. I decided I'll just clear out, that area, right? I was gonna clean out that area, and then